So for our very first keynote, I present to you a rock star, and he's going to talk about unlocking enterprise value for a positive future of knowledge work, and that is Martin Kahn. He is President Emeritus, Coherent, and former CEO of Google's YouTube division. He's worked with governments and organizations around the world and shares his view of the landscape. He's a global leader in enterprise-grade language AI. He explores how organizations can effectively harness the power of AI to transform KM. He can help accelerate decision-making, unlocking levels of performance across all sectors. He's also really interested in skiing, and his daughters are ski racers. And I learned this morning he has 4 passports. He's truly a citizen of the world. Canadian, US, German, and British. So let's please welcome Martin Kahn to the stage.
That was a mouthful. I have to talk about all those things. I'm not sure how successful I'm going to be, but thank you very much for the welcome. It's great to be back here in Washington. I am a naturalized American, so I actually had to work hard for it. Answer some tough questions about history and so on. But I'm really thrilled and flattered to be here. I will try and do justice to some of what you asked me to talk about. One thing struck me when I was just looking at the calendar. I was previously at Google. I was the CFO. I was not the CEO. That was Susan Wojcicki, the late Susan Wojcicki, my boss, and Ruth Porat, my other boss. Pretty cool to have 2 of the most powerful women in the world as your girl bosses when you're a girl dad. But I had signed to join Cohere a little over 3 years ago. The announcement went out internally on November 29th. And on November 30th, what happened? ChatGPT was launched. That's in 12 days. 3 years ago in 12 days. So it's amazing to think about what's changed and what's gone on in the world in the last 3 years. But that was really this sort of seminal moment. We love to say OpenAI is like our marketing department because it saved us 2 hours in every single meeting. We didn't have to explain what an LLM was. We didn't have to explain what AI could do. Now, very briefly, Cohere is all about enterprise AI. We're one of the frontier AI labs in the world. Of the 6 main ones, I'll leave China out for now, but of the 6 main ones, we're the only one of those 6 that's fully independent from big tech. The others are all attached to big hyperscalers and big tech. We're fully independent and focus only on enterprise. Now, in the 3 years since, I think we've all enjoyed the articles about AGI and pontifications about the end of humanity and Terminators taking over the world and so on. As with every major tech innovation, I think 3 things are true. And over the last 3 years, history's repeated itself here. Number 1, everyone is an expert once they read 2 articles. And maybe the week before they were a metaverse expert, and the week before that they were AR, VR. Now suddenly they're AI experts. Number 2, everyone gets excited by hyperbole, and it makes for great clickbait. And number 3, we always massively overestimate the near-term impact of tech innovations, and we massively underestimate the long-term implications and transformation of tech. And that's where I think we are right now. So today, I wanted to be a little bit boring, not hyperbolic. Enough other people are being hyperbolic. A lot of AI CEOs say only they know the future of humanity and will give it to you if you give them enough money. But I want to talk a bit about how enterprise AI can actually take hold, including and especially in knowledge industries and knowledge functions that you all lead and are part of. Now, if I pause for a second, and apologies if you're going to say I'm being hyperbolic, but in my mind, this is the biggest disruption and transformation in how humans and computers interact in the last 30 years. And as you can tell by the color of my beard, I am old enough to remember that. When I went to college at McGill, I didn't have email. I graduated in '93, the last time a Canadian team won the Stanley Cup. But what happened after that, the Mosaic browser came out in May '93, and it changed everything. everything, every knowledge worker, every job, every customer service interaction, everything, every company was replatformed. That just seems like a truism now, but we're in the same situation now. This is the biggest disruption and transformation in the way that we as humans communicate, interact, entertain, inform ourselves that we've seen in the last 30 years since the Mosaic browser came out, and the internet, which now we probably use 10 hours a day without even thinking about it, was still brand new. Now imagine doing your jobs today without Google search. Or imagine if one company had it and their competitor did not. Without Wikipedia, without all the information at our fingertips. I remember when I started in consulting, I was unfortunately a consultant for about 23 years, going up to the reference library, which was 2 floors up from the 20th floor that we were on the 22nd floor. I had to look through bound books of 10Ks. I even used microfiche. This is the beginning of my career in 1995 or 6, I think it was. Then we upgraded. We had 2 AOL terminals, and we could go and dial into AOL to look at some web pages and all this, the internetwork, which was such this incredible thing. A team of analysts would be working for days, even weeks perhaps, on a summary of top companies in a market or a region. Now, the CEO just simply puts that in her search browser, and in 10 seconds she has the answer. All of that seems so, obvious, but the same kind of transformation will happen through AI, through harnessing the power of language and technology together going forward. And so 30 years ago, early adoption created competitive advantage. So much so that some companies just ceased to exist. I mean, imagine if you had a meeting at the White House to talk about the future of the internet in 1996, and you had Olivetti, EDS, and Nortel, CEOs, not Larry and Sergey and Marc Andreessen and Jeff Bezos. That's a little bit like today, going and talking to the tech incumbents about the future of AI, not the people who are inventing this tech. I'm fortunate to work in a company. Our co-founder and CEO, Aidan Gomez, is one of the inventors of the transformer, the TNGPT. You might be familiar with RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. That was coined by Patrick Lewis, who's at Coherent in London. SBERT, sentence transformers, those were invented by Nils Reimers, who's with us in Darmstadt, Germany, and the list goes on. So these are people who are literally inventing this technology. Interestingly, and I'm still very long on Google stock, but the 7 or 8 authors of the attention paper at Google all have left. They've all gone to found or join startups. Aidan was actually the first and the youngest. But also AI has a really exciting potential to bridge the skills gap. And this is probably something interesting for the room here. Could flatten the productivity curve from the least to most productive. So AI can help less productive people more than it can help more productive people. It helps everyone. But it's really interesting. For example, I can write a business letter in French. It would take me a long time, and I have to fix it many, many times. If I had a tool to help me do that and help me correct it or help me do a draft, that's going to help me much more than my mother, whose French is almost perfect. And so what happens then is you're able to enable employees to engage in fields that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. Even more excitingly, it can enable regions of the world to engage in ways that they couldn't. Our generative models speak the top 23 global business languages extremely well. Search and retrieval works across 109. And so that means that people who may speak Swahili are able to engage and have jobs and contribute in a way that they simply could not before by leveraging this technology. And so people say a lot, is everyone going to lose their jobs to AI? I've heard this now increasingly. I hope you all believe this is true, that you will not lose your job to AI. You will lose your job to someone else who's embracing AI. And that's the same with the internet, same with mobile, same with cloud, et cetera, et cetera. However, just like in the late 90s with pets.com and all this consumer-driven hype, the vast majority of the hype, the chat, the articles have been about consumer chatbots, about hyperbole, about AGI, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's important to recognize the true transformation of our economy will come from enterprise adoption. And our co-founders, you'll often hear say ROI, not AGI. most of the hype to date, as I've said, is about mass market consumer-focused tools. And consumer is interesting, it's fun, it's often a winner-take-all business. I know it quite well, I've worked in it for a while. Think Netflix, think YouTube, think Spotify, think Google Search. You generally have a dominant player, because it's all delivered at massive scale to hundreds of millions or billions of people. And by definition, it is generic. It has to be generic because it's being used by 800 million people. So think about Google Search. It's one of the most successful products in history. It's incredible. One of the biggest inventions in the history of mankind. The wheel, penicillin, fire, they were pretty good too. But 3.3 billion of us use it every single day. What has Google done in enterprise search? Zero. Because serving 3 billion people, or at YouTube, we had 2.8 billion. We push out a new product launch. There are about 1,000 a year. And within a second, 2.8 billion people are using it. Enterprise is building to building combat. Every enterprise is different. And so taking consumer technology and just plopping it inside enterprise is not the way you're going to have success. It has not worked in any other part of technology in the past, as we've seen from incredible innovations like Google Search in the public realm, but in the private enterprise realm, it's a very, very different very, very different game. And so, pausing for a second, it's exciting for me to be in this room with you all. You're likely some of the most important agents of change that will exist. This is not about adopting myriad apps and tools and trying 150 different things on your iPhone like you might in consumer. Rather, this is about how AI can be integrated into the core workflows inside organizations, enabling them to make better use of knowledge and information than their competitors can. The real question is, how will ways of working change? Similar to my evolution as a young consultant, not going to the reference library, looking through microfiche, spending a week with a team of analysts trying to do something, logging onto AOL, and now, today being able to get that same information almost instantaneously, and then spending a lot more time synthesizing it, working it through. It's completely changed workflows and ways of working within organizations. That's what's going to be important, and of course you all, I believe, are right at the heart of figuring out how are we getting the right information, right knowledge to people to make the right decisions in the right time frame and influence the right people and so on and so forth. And so there really is an unprecedented opportunity to, what I've heard someone else say, unlock the lost knowledge within enterprises. There's a massive information data spread all over organizations, deeply in the bowels of all different systems and so on. And I know this from back in the old days. I'd say, hey, didn't so-and-so do something for this market? And they'd say, yeah, talk to, Yoshi in Tokyo. Oh, no, he left. Oh, and it's all lost knowledge. And someone else once said to me, it's akin to finding needles in haystacks. And every year, those haystacks get bigger, and those needles get more valuable. And if you can use technology, and that's what we at Cohere are excited to help our partners and customers do, if you can use your technology to help your customers and partners find needles in haystacks, unlock this lost information that is just not providing any value to people because it's lost, and enable people, just like Google Search in the public sphere, to have access to 1,000, 10,000 times more information to make much better decisions more quickly, and especially if they can do that before their competitors and create alpha, that will separate the winners from the losers, just like we have the Netflix and Blockbuster or Barnes & Noble and Amazon from 30 years ago. So what are some of the key elements to focus on here? Again, I wanted to be boring and not hyperbolic. You can get lots of data and charts from all sorts of people. You don't need me for that. There are 4 themes that are dear to sort of our positioning that I thought I might impart. Data privacy and security, deploying solutions versus experimenting with models, differentiating between generic mass market capabilities and capabilities that generate alpha, and then how to deploy in production at massive scale, thinking about TCO. So going back to data privacy and security. Many AI providers that you will see out there are beholden to their hyperscalers because the value proposition is lock in cloud revenue all the way to locking in chip usage. Most of the hyperscalers are now making their own chips because they prefer perhaps not to ship all their money to Santa Clara, to Jensen. And so in many cases, they might even just give away the AI to lock you into their cloud ecosystem. That could be fine for many people. Many may be totally fine operating in the cloud. But many enterprises are wary or find it dangerous on two things. One, to be locked into an ecosystem, and if you want to then renegotiate your contracts next year or 3 years from now, it's going to be tough if all of your tech is locked into that. But secondly, many enterprises, or let's say some enterprises, may not be comfortable sending their data out of their environment to someone else's environment. That's not always the case, but it certainly is the case for example, critical infrastructure sectors, often highly regulated sectors, government sectors. You're hearing a lot more about sovereign AI, meaning we don't want to send this out of our national boundaries if you're a bank or a healthcare company. And so the idea about data privacy and security is very, very important as part of the decision making. Many of these consumer apps are just pure SaaS, like you just bang an API or you go and use an app. By definition, they're out in the public realm. Plopping that into enterprise is very, very challenging. I was with our friends at Dell recently. Michael Dell was talking first, and he was saying that, I'm going to get this number wrong, it was either 75 or 85. I think it was 85% of companies are saying that they are pulling more of their data on-prem, which is like the opposite of what we've seen cloud. They're pulling data back on-prem because they say we want to have certain of our information and data in our four walls. Some cases quite literally. Could also be VPC. There's many different solutions, regional clouds, et cetera, et cetera. Secondly, deploying solutions versus experimenting with models. So I'll give you a couple of analogies here. Many people have said LLMs are commoditizing. My take on that is electricity is also commoditized. That doesn't mean it's easy to make. It's still really hard to make. You need a nuclear power plant. We happen to have built one, metaphorically, as have a few other companies. But no one walks around saying, hey, do you want to buy 20 kilowatt hours? You know, do you want a 2-for-1 Thursday special on electricity? It's a means to doing something with that. That's how AI has been for the past 3 years, for the most part, which is, hey, can I try your model? How much are your tokens? Let's put you in our model garden with 17 other models. You know, let's have our AI team play around for a bit. And I liken that to when I was a kid. I'm dating myself again here. My dad and I went to Radio Shack and we bought some transistors and we bought a circuit board and a soldering iron and we made a radio, and it was so much fun. I loved it. You could even like tune it and you could hear a little bit of static and crackle. My dad did not use that to play music at the dinner party that evening. But that's a little bit about what's happened with AI, which is everyone has a couple of SWEs, a couple of MLEs who say, oh, I can take a bit of LangChain, a bit of this, a bit of tokens, I'm going to test these models and build something together. Okay, that's factually true, but is that enterprise grade software? Is that enterprise grade that's going to give you alpha against your competitor? Do you really believe that you're going to be able to, as a company, out-innovate or like build a transistor radio that's going to do the same thing as the Bang & Olufsen that your competitor has? The needs of enterprises, I think you all know, are much more than a consumer app with a volume discount for multiple users, which in many cases is what enterprise AI is, which is, you know, ABC for enterprise is just a volume discount on lots of licenses. It's still delivered over an API, it's still an app, it's still generic. By definition, it has to be generic. But enterprise grade means SOC 2 Type 2. It means ISO 27001. It means ISO 42001. It means GDPR if you're operating in the European Union, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You need something that addresses data access privileges, observability, citations of where information comes from so you know that it is the right, you know, source. It's your controller who talked about interest rates, not, you know, some whatever, gray-haired, hyperbolic guy running up and down on stage. These are the things that are essential for enterprise. and having something that works in the very, very specific configuration of specific enterprises. A packaged solution is fine for a packaged problem, but the most valuable opportunities facing enterprise are generally not packaged problems. And that brings me to my to my next point, which is differentiating between generic mass market capabilities and customized, configured capabilities that generate alpha. So I think a little bit of a hierarchy of needs in AI, and like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the widest part of that are the generic mass market features and actions that billions of us will do many times an hour that will be supported by AI. These will be extremely well served by Microsoft and Google. They'll be built into 365. They'll be built into Workspace. I don't know if we have any investors here, but I'm assuming that not many of you are investing in spell check startups or signing up for an autocomplete app for your enterprise. No, because all of it's just built into Gmail or PowerPoint. It's in there. The same is going to be true of auto-generating a draft of your assistant's retirement speech or summarizing a document. Just going to be built into the productivity software we use. Those companies will charge a few bucks more. I think they already are if I look at our Google bill over the last little while. And my old boss, Ruth, is thrilled because you do that times hundreds of millions of people times 12 months and you've got a really great business. So a lot of the companies who do thin wrappers on other people's tech are going to be challenged because a lot of this generic stuff, generic's not bad. Google search is generic. It's not bad at all. It'll be built in there, so don't waste any time. The next layer up are the enterprise SaaS solutions that are embedded in every company on the planet, and they're not going to go anywhere quickly. Oracle Fusion, NetSuite, SAP, Bloomberg, Experian. I'm sure many of you know these companies much better than I ever will. They all need to reinvent themselves. I think you're seeing some certainly market reaction to some of the challenges of these companies needing to reinvent themselves, just like Microsoft reinvented themselves several times over history. And those who do the reinvention quickly are going to be successful, as we've seen with other evolutions. But this tech is being built into what they do. So as one example, we actually power a lot of the functions in Fusion and NetSuite. You can auto-generate job descriptions. You don't need to make an app for that. You don't need to go hire a consultant to build that. It will just be done within HCM for Fusion. It happens to be powered by Cohere. There are many other things that are powered by others as well. And you can take advantage of that kind of technology to do a lot of the less mission-critical things. Certainly important, but they're not going to differentiate you if you're quicker at doing JDs than your competitor. The top of that hierarchy of needs is where it gets really interesting. And those are the mission-critical capabilities that give you alpha. So if you're a bank and how you do loan pricing, you're not going to do that with a third-party app. You have your proprietary systems, technology, information, data. If you want to give better information, better service to your wealth management customers on making investments, on planning for college, whatever, those are things that you want to do better than your competitors. And that's where you want to have proprietary capabilities that are customized and configured with your data, with your experience, with your information, with your knowledge to enable your people to make better decisions than your competitors' people. And that's where there's a big difference, in our minds at least, between the generic capabilities that will be amazing and they will generate lots of money, they'll be great, just like Google search, and the specific capabilities that need to be customized and configured. And this requires a deep knowledge of how an enterprise works, and it requires customization and configuration of the technology for specific needs, not just deploying a chatbot or adding in an app into the environment. And lastly, how to deploy in production at massive scale. One of my friends from McKinsey, who's now at Blackstone, Rodney, I have to cite him. He said, "Be wary of death by 1,000 POCs." And we're still a little bit in that state where there's lots of POCs, proofs of concept. I've heard many say, if you're still proving the concept, you're too late. But this is still what's happening. It's like, let's try this. Let's do a POC. And if you do that, you then have something really cool, which is likely tech that's not enterprise grade, that is delivered through through cloud with a slick GUI that impresses the board and all 5 of the users that simply can't be rolled out into production. All the hard work of putting it in production hasn't even been thought of yet. And so what we've seen is a lot of these POCs getting people excited, but then not going into production because all the hard work still has to then happen. And in our mind, the key is to find something. It could be anything. We've had customers do it with employee onboarding that you deploy at massive scale across the company because it forces you to do what we call the yucky stuff. Occasionally I use more colorful language, but I don't know if this is Chatham House rules, so I won't. All the yucky stuff to make things work in your enterprise environment, the gnarly, yucky issues that are hard to do. I'll talk about a couple examples in a second, but the scars that we have on our back from doing some of these things then give us an opportunity to help the next company to do them as well. But if a bank is early in doing this, what that means is they might have taken 1 or 2 or 3 simple things to roll out at massive scale. The next 5, 50, 500 are going to be way quicker to do because they've actually built the infrastructure, built the capability to do this within their own data environment, rolling it out in the future, rather than the sequential. I'm not going to dunk on my former colleagues, but hire a consultant, do a list of all your use cases, pick one, do a POC, try and put it in production, and then rinse and repeat. That's not the way you're going to be transforming a company, and I'll give you a great example that illustrates that in a second. The other as well is that AI today is heavily subsidized. API calls, token costs, in many cases, token prices, in many cases are sold below cost of the compute that you need. Now, yes, costs over time should come down, but a lot of that is because they're being funded by the big tech companies, which makes sense, so that everyone's using this. But at some point, the pricing is going to have to go and cover the costs and the R&D and so on and so forth. And so in many cases, mass adoption of POCs with some of these enormous AI models that everyone thinks are great because they win Pokemon contests or whatever, are simply unaffordable. And it's very important to think about that affordability. I don't want to make this about us, but just to show you what enterprise means, that's all we do. Command A, our Command A generation that is out now, Command 4 will be coming out quite shortly, runs on 2 GPUs. DeepSeek V3 requires 8 and GPT-4o requires 16 for the same throughput. So that means you're using 4 or 8 times as much compute for the same, throughput. Now, someone may say, oh, but this one, is better at Pokemon and this one can generate images of, unicorns flying through rainbows. But that's completely irrelevant if you can't afford to roll this out to your 5, 10, 50, 100,000 employees, or have them use it like we do now with our phones, 8 hours a day or 4 hours a day rather than just 1 or 2 times. So that idea about efficiency and thinking upfront about what will this look like in production at scale, and how can we make sure that we're not doing things now that we're just going to find in 6 months, we can't actually deploy in the market. So let me give you some examples. Am I doing okay on time? Okay. So I'll give you some examples, and these are all public. So you can read about this or Google it to see if I'm making it up. So one is in banking. I mentioned a lot about data privacy, data security, alpha, all these things you can imagine. Banks are pretty keen to address all of these things. I'm sure we have some folks from banks here. RBC is that's actually the largest company in Canada, but it's also one of the leading banks, I think number 5 in North America. It's already number 3 on the Evident AI Maturity Index, JP Morgan Chase, Capital One, RBC, so already extremely advanced. They have a great team, Borealis, led by Dr. Fotani. Their CEO is an engineer, very forward thinking. Their issue is not, we need you to come and tell us what use cases make sense, or are your tokens cheaper than someone else's tokens. Their issue was, we have 14 risk departments and a federal regulator. We have 192 things we want to build, but one of those 14 says no to everything, with very, very few exceptions. And even those exceptions can only be used by 100, 200 people because of all the risks. We need a partner to help us figure out how do we get those 14 to say yes and allow us to deploy at scale. And there were a bunch of things, just like table stakes was data leakage, meaning private deployment. So RBC deploys this on-prem in their own data center. Others, other banks have done that in a VPC with their cloud provider, but a virtual private cloud. But there were a whole bunch of other things, hallucinations, citations, are these, a generic model is fine, but, does it really understand the nuance of, risk management in, federally regulated, utilities sector that we need to, have bond pricing for, whatever. It's not enough to have the generic capabilities. And so they wanted to create a platform, and that's where our North Agentic AI platform has been deployed, inside their data environment. And it's not just saying, here's the API, have fun. It's got to be on their on-prem deployment, linked to their data sources, linked to their tools so that it can do tool use, so that it can do RAG within their environment, their data access privileges, their orchestration, their controls, all of these things. I call it the 90% of the iceberg underwater that no one writes articles about because they're not hyperbolic fun, but the really hard stuff to get right. And so that means that now, I was on stage with their head of capital markets tech in New York recently, and they now have several thousand people who are using this, where before some of the previous solutions were limited to a couple hundred because it's deployed safely. They're able to create their own agents in a no-code way because it's already deployed in their environment, and they can focus on working with the teams. How is this going to change my workflow? A second example, which is actually somewhat similar, in the telco space. STC is the leading telco in the Gulf, Saudi Telecom. And it was actually kind of a similar genesis there. It wasn't, I need more ideas. Dr. Najwa, who leads their AI team, who's amazing, we're going to be together on stage next week in Doha at Mobile World Congress. She had, I call her the pragmatic visionary. Like I've never seen someone who could be pragmatic and visionary at the same time. And she wanted everyone with the CEO to have a digital coworker, or maybe multiple. Now everyone calls them agents. She was prescient and called them digital coworkers. And they had she said, I have set up my team that I can build 150 of these digital coworkers in the next, I think it was 3 or 4 years, because of the capabilities and the capacity that's required to do that. And then after spending time together as we got to know each other, well, if we can deploy North, which is our agentic AI foundry, it has all the generative models, search and retrieval capabilities, all of the yucky, boring stuff, chunking, parsing, observability, and so on, but in your data environment, then I can greatly accelerate what we're doing. She called it the digital coworker foundry, meaning I've got now a foundry to make digital coworkers because we did all the yucky hard work, maybe using the first 2, 3, 4, 5 as just, catalysts. I saw her 2 weeks ago when I was in Riyadh. She told me they've done 2,500 agents. We started working with them in February. 2,500 agents they've built because you can do it in a no-code way. They have a change management group that goes around and sits down with each different group in the telco and says, what do you do with your job? What do you not like about it? How do you transform your job? Okay, now let's do that with and for you. Really visionary. The next step, of course, is then how do they take that to their own customers in government, in enterprise, and so on. But just the pragmatic, let's get this deployed. It wasn't let's go and spend time doing more studies about ROI of use cases, because in about 3 weeks, that's just obsolete anyway. How do you enable people to say, I have an idea today, and I can actually build something to automate a workflow in the next 2 days, because all of this hard work has been done to connect all these things together. Brings me to my third example, which is in the healthcare space. You can think about data being extremely sensitive, private, and so on. This is US healthcare, so pretty complex system with payers, providers, and so on. There's a company called Ensemble Health Partners. Judson, the CEO, has been very public about this. And it's a very competitive sector. They do the revenue cycle management of connecting payers, providers, and so on in the US healthcare system, many, many billions of dollars. And they have to do this right. If there's a mistake, they have to rework it, and that gets very costly. And what he has said publicly is that using our agentic AI platform, but working with them side by side to deploy this, not just plugging in a generic app, he's going to automate 40% of their workflow in 6 months. And that's extraordinary. Now, for him, he's saying it's existential, because if I don't do it and my competitor does, I'm going to have problems in about 12 months, 24 months. Or if I can do it a bit quicker than my competitor, I'm going to win business from them. And so now this is about, it's actually a system of agents, 4 or 5 that are interrelated. It wasn't like, oh, we have the, here's our app, plug it in. Because a lot of that was, how do we deploy this technology to redefine the workflow of this very probably unique process of the way they do things to enable them to do it better than they do today and better than their competitors do. And that's what I was saying about, especially with you all who deal with so many different processes, workflows, all of which needs knowledge, information in order to make the decisions, whether that's revenue cycle management, whether that's high net worth individuals, whether that's making loan decisions, whether that's figuring out which wells to drill for an oil and gas company, et cetera. It's about getting better information and knowledge to the right people at the right time in a way that augments, let's say, complements the generic capabilities of Googling, who the biggest companies in France are. How about understanding which of your customers is at risk of churning because no one's talked to them in 6 months, their revenues are slightly declining, they're in a market where a competitor has been very active out there, they said no to the last 3 times we invited them to the baseball game, and blah, blah, blah. If you could have that, the same as you could saying what are the top 10 companies in France, that's going to be hugely valuable in preventing churn, attrition, whatever the case is. That's one of hundreds of thousands of examples. But the point is, you shouldn't then say, let's build that. It's let's build the capabilities so that the person thinking about that can build that themselves or can initiate that personal agent or that workflow automation because they realize it's something valuable. So you're unlocking the creativity of your people by having these capabilities to enable them to create agentic capabilities. The last one, the fourth one I have, I won't go into a lot of detail because I'm sure you can all pick this yourselves, but is government. And I'm assuming we have some government people here, given we're in Washington, but also because of how transformative AI will be and the importance of knowledge there. And there's an enormous transformational opportunity for efficiency in delivering government services. Yesterday, Prime Minister Carney in Canada just had his budget passed. There's a big reduction in public sector spend, and one of the ways he's going to do that is through AI. In the Gulf region, there's some exciting things that they're doing. You can already do 97% of all of your government services digitally. You can get your passport renewed on your phone in Saudi and UAE, but now how they're deploying AI in government services is going to be really interesting. And of course, there's huge aspirations and huge plans going on right here in Washington and through state and municipal governments as well. But then there's also the other end of that, which is high-side intelligence and national security. We're involved in a fair bit of this for the good guys. I don't know what we do. I don't have top secret clearance. But the idea really is how do you ensure the good guys have better information than our adversaries? And that's where I mentioned briefly about our search and retrieval capabilities, which are objectively the best in the world. They work across 109 languages. So if you're an intelligence analyst, if you're in signals intelligence, and you can look for signal across 109 languages really quickly, that's probably going to give you a good advantage to keeping us safe over not having access to those same capabilities. So anyway, let me end off here with some questions for discussion or consideration that maybe pull back to my my 4 points and try and make this a bit more like, okay, what does this mean for me? Maybe nothing, but hopefully something. So number one, what data are you comfortable sending out of your environment using public cloud? How will data sovereignty, including potentially national sovereignty, I'm assuming there are many multinationals present here, become important in your sector? And that is something that is becoming a real thing around sovereign cloud. We laugh a little bit because people suddenly think keeping things near your national border is really important. It's like, well, if you're a bank, sending it from Dusseldorf to Frankfurt to someone else's cloud still is not something you'd accept. You want it sovereign in your own, in your own basement perhaps. But there are some things around data sovereignty and data and national security that are coming to the fore, and for multinational global companies, something to think about. But even before that, what data are you comfortable sending out of your environment, sending to a hyperscaler, and what data would you maybe want to keep more private? The answer could be, we're totally fine, and many, many companies will be. But that's a good question to ask as a starting point. Secondly, what are the generic capabilities that will be part of existing platforms that you can look to for others to provide and not expend your own time and effort unnecessarily? The JD example. Your service provider should be providing those kind of things in your human capital management systems, let's say. You don't need to go and build them yourself. But let's be clear about where that's happening. And if your provider's not providing it, then switch providers, right? That's going to be the new competitive situation where you will demand to have these things from your service providers, just as your own companies probably are going to be have demands that you provide these kind of services, or your customers would also switch. I think that's a spell check autocomplete example. But the flip side of that, you probably need to answer these together, is what are your company's core competencies? What are the things that you need to continue to do better than competition, and thus you don't want to just do what everyone else does? For anyone who's interested, there's some really good videos from John Rose with an E, two E's, R-O-E-S-E. He's the group CTO of Dell. And he talks a lot about Dell's vision. They've been transforming the entire company internally with AI. They're a close partner of ours. We actually are pre-configured on Dell as they ship private deployments to their customers. Our North platform is pre-configured. But John talks about Dell does 5 things. Now I'm going to forget them. But supply chain is one example. That is our bread and butter. We're never going to go to some third-party platform to run our supply chain or use AI. Those are the things we want to invest in. But the job descriptions in HCM, that's not really how Dell is going to continue to be successful. And he puts it much more eloquently than I do. But the entire company has been built around, doing 5 things and really investing their time and effort, substantial time and effort, into creating customized, configured capabilities that are differentiated for those key areas, and then not worrying about the other stuff. That doesn't mean they don't do it. That means they may look to other, off-the-shelf or generic capabilities for things that are not part of their core competency. So I think I really like that as a way to think about where do you invest your time and effort, and where do you rely on your platform providers. You don't need something to auto-generate emails. It's going to happen in Gmail or Outlook. So, but the other things that are important to your company, you do want to do. Thirdly, how can you reimagine the actual workflows and ways of working enabled by agentic capabilities in your organizations, leveraging the very highly sensitive and therefore highly valuable internal information to unlock this lost knowledge? And I talk about lost knowledge all the time, not just for this room, even though, it's KM world. I think you all are in the middle of this, not just in sort of your own function, but saying, how can you redefine the workflow in a core part of our business by bringing this lost knowledge to those professionals in a way that our competitors aren't doing? And what we've seen over the last, I'd say 6 to 12 months, Miranda Nash was the head of product at Oracle Fusion. She was our customer 1. And she talked to dozens of CIOs, over 100, I think she said. And what she said over the last 6 to 12 months, she came to talk to my team. So this is, I think I can share this, is that people have changed from initially wanting to sort of automate and use AI for all the lowest value jobs, hey, let's do all the back office stuff, to actually saying, hold on, how do we put this in the hands of our most expensive people? Because if you can make, whether that's metaphorical or whether that's literal, if you can make your brain surgeons more effective that's going to have a much bigger impact on the success of your endeavor than saying, can we make something that is lower value better. Now, I'm sure we're going to end up doing all of the above, as 30 years ago, but there has been this shift to saying, okay, now it's getting real. How do we make our high net worth client advisors better? How do we make our equity analysts better? We're working with a very large alternative asset manager, multi-hundreds of billions, and we're creating a digital investment brain. Now, that may only be used by, 50 people. So we're not pricing per seat. Because if they can make better decisions, and these are literally $100 billion decisions in some cases, if they can make that better, either avoid risk or pay the right amount to win a deal from their competitors, that's just an enormous outcome. And so that's been a bit of a change, even, she said, over the last 6 or so months. And she was the one who actually built this stuff. She's the one who put the job description, automated job descriptions and CV summaries and so on into Fusion HCM. It is great. But when she's talking to CIOs, that's almost table stakes. They're saying, how are you going to transform my core workflows, which is, I think, where many of you could come in. And then lastly, what can you roll out at scale now to force you to do the hard work, gain the scar tissue, and thus greatly facilitate ongoing innovation in the future? It's not about which app do we deploy, because by the way, they'll all change in 6 months. It's about what can we roll out in production at massive scale, explicitly because it will be hard and it will be uncomfortable and you will have scars. But by doing that before your competitors, as I said, the next 10, 50, 100, 2,500 for STC, agents' capabilities will be able to happen. I don't want to say like that, but much more than, oh, let's go and try a new app, or let's go and hire some new consultants, or let's go and try a new API. And that's what I gave sort of 3 concrete examples. The government one was a bit more generic, but 3 concrete examples, very public, of companies who in quite different sectors, telco, and then of course telco serves everyone, so that's more than just telco, but a huge regulated bank and a company right in the bowels, let's say, of the U.S. healthcare system, saying how do we make this more efficient and give better service at a more affordable cost overall. And I'm sure all of you would have similar kinds of opportunities. I wasn't saying this facetiously. I was very excited to be here because I do believe, yes, you need the CEO on board. If the CEO is not pushing for things to really be transformational, then nothing's really going to happen. You need the tech people, the CTOs, who know which closet the AS400s are still doing payroll after 50 years. They're the ones, by the way, who say no to everything. And you need the AI teams. The problem many people make is they just focus on the AI teams. And they're the ones building the transistor radios or doing, really wanting to do good stuff. But then the traditional tech people will say no to everything because data privacy or, no traceability or orchestration or whatever. You need all 3 of those. But what we've seen lately is that the CHRO, training and development or learning and development, and I think you all are actually increasingly important in the actual transformation because it's all about changing workflows and ways of working, not just deploying tech. And so I do think that you all have a very central role, potentially together with training and development, with HR, to say how do we upgrade the capabilities of our people by deploying these kind of technologies and giving them the not just the tools, but giving them the platform, the infrastructure to innovate themselves. I think that's all I have. I don't know if you do questions here or not, but if anyone, I'm certainly going to be around to chat, but if anyone has questions, comments, wants to tell me I'm full of it, please don't throw tomatoes or tomatoes. Yeah.
How do you, since POCs are such a common model
It's a great question. If you didn't hear it, if POCs are maybe a challenge to scale, how do you pick something tough and hard and scary in order to scale? A lot of this comes down to senior conviction. I mean, I could say the same thing about the internet back in the mid-90s. Some people hired, company XYZ to make an HTML page and then put a picture of the CEO and her phone number. We're digital. No, you're not. You have a web page. And so some would say, this is existential. We need to reinvent our business around it. So, and I know this is not helpful sometimes, but it's got to be the CEO having the conviction that we are going to make a major change here. But the second way to maybe do that is look for inspiration of what others have done. Now, it could be in your industry. The biggest motivation is competition. And if you say, our competitors just hired so-and-so or engaging with such and such and they're doing this, we're going to be dead in a year if we don't do this, or 2 years, right? That's certainly a big motivator. The other is why I mentioned sort of the global perspective. There's lots of interesting stuff happening around the world. Oftentimes the US is at the forefront, but sometimes it's not. When I was at YouTube for the first time, we actually launched Shorts in India at the same time as the US. It was the first time it had ever happened because there was a lot more innovation happening with India. TikTok had been banned. So there's some really interesting stuff that's happening in different places where you could say, wow, look at this company X, or look at this government, or look what they've done as inspiration. So it's probably kind of inspiration fear to say we need to do something bigger. And by the way, these deployments are not necessarily more expensive. In fact, I posit as a reformed BCG senior partner, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than hiring consultants. And a lot of times people spend millions of dollars that results in a POC, which is like a flashy demo with a GUI. You could have actually done something in deployment for the same or maybe even less. And that's why I think sitting down and sort of doing the sums, like what would this look like in production at scale, rather than doing a quick POC that seems easier and then get surprised. We had a bank that did a search capability and with other solutions with very big, expensive models that they were given for free for a while. And when they looked to roll this out, it was literally, I think at one point, 2 orders of magnitude too expensive, 100 times. It ended up with some things that was then sort of like 10 times too expensive. So, but they didn't really know that until everyone was like, okay, how do we roll this out now? Everyone's excited. So those might be a couple of examples. Yeah. The question was, are there some, if you're going to build infrastructure for the future, what are the things to focus on, especially everyone's resource constrained? It's a good question. I have a biased answer, so I apologize, but it's kind of how we built our company. So the great thing about AI is that you don't need to spend years bringing all your data in one place, because the whole point is that with extremely advanced search and retrieval capabilities, and with connectors to your data sources, including your very sensitive, secure internal data sources that you'd never throw out there on the, get indexed by a search engine or whatever, you actually can interoperate across a lot of different systems. You can pull information from different systems. So it's like intelligence is not you being a Jeopardy contestant, memorizing everything you might be asked today. That's not intelligent. Intelligence is knowing how, where, when to look for information when someone asks you. And so we teach our tech to do the same thing. The same is true. The first step is RAG. The second is tool use. How do you then call on tools and use systems that already exist? If you have a loan calculation system as a bank, you don't need to rebuild that. Just call upon it. And then the third step is agents. Everyone jumps to agents because it's a cool word to use, and they write a preamble and think they make agents. Unless you have the first 2 steps with an incredible search and retrieval capability deployed inside your data environment, working across different multi-clouds, hybrid, different systems, calling on your tools and so on. That's the way to methodically do that. And so you can actually have an independent platform that enables you to connect the various systems, connect the various tools, and operate, kind of like the swivel chair, in call centers that people used to talk about. If you can have a system do that rather than a human, you move down that path quite quickly. And I'm giving you an example to not say, let's spend $300 million on an ERP implementation as a first step or a data project.